Most people who watch films or claim to love films really have no idea what the films they watch are even about. They just, people just say that they describe a film by just saying what happened in it and then say it's good or it was a great film or, we're talking about The Usual Suspects today. So, it has the best ending of a film. It's a masterpiece. It's a classic. It doesn't, that's not, it doesn't describe anything. It just says that you enjoyed it. It just reminds me of My Dinner with Andre, where Wallace says, people go and see plays now, and that they sit there for 3 hours, and then they come out of it and they say, "Well, that was pretty good," and that's what basically everyone thinks about films. Like, you go on the IMDb page for this film. So these are people who care enough about films to make an account and write a review. And these are like the top rated reviews. The top one is titled "One of the best endings I've seen." And then all it says is, "I really enjoyed watching this, and I can fully see why it's branded as a masterpiece and an absolute classic. Has fantastic dialogue, great acting, but most importantly, the plot is so unique, and the final twists and turns are brilliant." It it just it doesn't describe anything. It just says that all the elements of the film were good, and then just synonyms for good. That's it. He continues, "Modern day films just don't have this kind of uniqueness anymore, sadly, and this is why I've been watching older films as of late." This is true, 100% true, but you don't explain why. Then he says, "My only criticism is that I thought the first half an hour was really slow. The movie had no direction and I was generally pretty bored. However, once it kicks into gear, I sat on the edge of my seat. I mentioned in the title the ending. This is generally has to be one of the best endings to a movie I've ever seen. The twists and turns in the final 15 minutes or so was amazing. I was gobsmacked, and very few films have ever managed to pull that off." That that is that is it in a nutshell. Like, so this person who has the highest rated review of The Usual Suspects, which is a good film, but the best insight from the democratic voters of the IMDb review section, like, this person just says they were bored and then they weren't bored. And that's as deep. This is not just like a random person. This is the IMDb reviews. Like, what hope do we have if even people who are interested in film cannot identify like what films are actually saying or why they're enjoyable? It's just, I was bored because he didn't understand the film, but doesn't understand why he was bored. And then the movie kicked into gear and I was excited because, the real reason is because the movie is well made. It has a lot of things that trigger the audience, like the music. There's, that noir, thriller, whimsical music that plays, the fast cut action, the the scenes that they build up the tension well, things like the cop coming back into the room with Verbil and then yelling at him and Verbil swearing, and it cuts to another scene, and scenes like that where they just build up. Something exciting happens at the end, like someone gets shot or there's an argument, and then it cuts back to like the other part of the story. Because The Usual Suspects, there's the interrogation, there's the flashback, there's the other room where the Ukrainian man is Ukrainian or Hungarian, I'm not sure, but he's recovering in the hospital. So this film is able to jump around, and it convinces your brain that exciting things are happening, because at the end of each scene there's almost like a cliffhanger before it jumps to the next section, and then there might be some exciting music or something threatening happens. It's just good movie making to keep people entertained. I'm not going to say it's a shallow film, because look, it is pretty good, but the things that people are excited about are the exciting action, the things jumping around. And then, yeah, obviously the ending's going to get mentioned, where there's obviously the big twist ending, but just before that, there's another mini twist where, Keaton is said to be the one who's behind it all, and it sort of doesn't really feel right in terms of the movie. Like, it feels like it could be an ending, but it really does feel like a red herring, which it is, before it is said that it's Verbil, which I don't know. It obviously it really works, but the point of the film is that it pulls the rug under you and it's like this hidden in plain sight thing, but there's no way you could have really guessed that it was him unless you were logically to deduce, from having watched a lot of films, okay, they're introducing this character, Kaiser Soze, who really only gets mentioned about halfway through the film, maybe once before that, but that ends up growing as the movie goes along. At the start, it's not really all about who is Kaiser Soze, but as the movie goes along, that becomes the key question. If that had been framed from the start as the key question, I think a lot more people would have guessed that it is Verbil. But I think that question sneaks up on you until right at the end, where it is a boiling point, like who is Kaiser Soze, and the movie doesn't really give you enough time to really think about it. Like, it doesn't put it on your radar until right at the end, but there's been just enough mention of the name Kaiser Soze that it's not really out of left field that is the important piece of information at the end. The film is actually quite clever the way it does that, where it doesn't tip you off right from the start that Kaiser Soze is the centerpiece of the movie. It's just a bit of a mystery crime thriller from the get-go. And then almost before it's too late, then you realize, like, oh, it is kind of about Kaiser Soze, and it ends up being Verbil, but it doesn't give you a lot of time to put that information together, even though you think that you've been hearing about Kaiser Soze for the whole film. So that's why it's well made. It's not well made because it is this intricately woven story, which, so I think that might be the second review on IMDb where it's where is it? It might be the third one. Yeah, I think in the third one it says it's intricate, like this intricately woven story, and it's something that on the second watch, like, you'll see all the details and jump up at the screen. That there's so many layers to this film, and there really isn't. And I've watched this film probably at least 5 times now, and you it is one of those films where you get to the end of the film and you think this will be a great film to watch on a rewatch, because there's a twist ending and you'll be able to see how you could have figured it out the first time. But what happens when you watch it again is that doesn't happen. You're aware that Verbil is Kaiser Soze. You're aware that he's been lying to the police for the whole film. But that doesn't really make any sense, because the things in his story did happen. They might not have happened exactly as he said, but given at the end of the story with the boat, he wants to kill this man who can identify him, which he does. It wouldn't then make sense if Verbil had revealed himself to all of his accomplices in the film, because then he's just spreading that information more and more. So the way it plays out in the flashback is probably somehow similar to what actually was meant to happen. And he just changed some of the names of the characters, like Kobayashi on the bottom of the mug. But other than that, it's I don't think you can take away that this whole film was a lie, because some of these things did check out as the police were speaking about them. Like, obviously Keaton as the big red herring, he's spoken about a lot, and by all reports, like everything that you see in the film, it would indicate that his character was legitimate, that this police officer had been hunting him for years. So this other idea that everything that Verbil said was a lie is also not true. It seems that Verbil was underplaying his hand to his accomplices, and almost holding power from the bottom and being able to manipulate them and using Kobayashi or whoever he really is, because we see him pick up Verbil at the end, so he's clearly a real person who is involved. So it seems like most of those scenes did happen. And even in the reveal, it's like, oh, Redfoot. And then it turns out Redfoot was not the correct name. And you can see the blonde actor, he sort of looks away as if like, oh, that was all a trick. But it probably wasn't a trick. That was probably a real person in the story. But he just was named something else and he picked up Redfoot. Like, the scene of the coffee where the coffee mug smashes on the ground and then it says Kobayashi is just brilliant for that moment where you see like the camera zooms in at just this old coffee mug that says Kobayashi. Like, that is such a great thing for the audience to see, because the audience will get this aha reaction where they're like, oh, he was lying. But the movie wraps up so quickly, and it is great the way it does it. But when you really think about it or watch back, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And even some of the lies that Verbil comes up with, like the barbershop quartet or the whatever he was doing in Guatemala, like they're two of the ones. When you watch the film again, as soon as he starts bringing that up to try and get the detective sidetracked, like the detective just cuts him off straight away. So those things which the camera zooms on and it's like, oh, he got away with this big lie. He didn't really get away with those lies at all in the moment. But yeah, so you are misled to think you can go back a second time and sort of get something deeper from the film. Most of the times where I've gone back, I've been looking for these things, and the film just plays out like normal, and it's almost like, oh, this is all a lie, but then it doesn't make sense that it's a lie because these characters are all real, the police are aware of all of them. So I guess we're led to believe a lot of this happened, but there's perhaps a few lies that happened. But even with the boat incident where supposedly as Kaiser Soze, he wants to just kill the the person who can identify him. What he's done is he's then tipped off a lot of other people that he's Kaiser Soze, including the Eastern European. I think he's Hungarian, because he's able to identify him with the sketch. So, given that his plan was to, I guess, take out the last person who could identify him, even though he wasn't really on anyone's radar, he's now put himself on everyone's radar, and that they had him, in the lineup, so that they'll know exactly what he looks like. It won't just be that sketch. So it's almost like his plan, unless he escaped with the money, unless that was real. If his plan was just evading capture, he seems to have put himself in more danger. So the fact that it sort of wraps up so quickly, and you just sort of left to think like he did this brilliant plan, but he didn't. And the real brilliant plan that's happening is you're, as an audience, convinced that it's this great film or like great twist and this intricately woven like masterpiece with great dialogue, like great characters, like, because you've just had this cause and effect where you've been tricked by all like the music and the cuts and the twist that you haven't had really time to process in your brain, that you've seen something amazing, but really it's just the magic and the trickery of movie making convincing your brain that is not prepared, given how it reacts to things, to receive all this information in such a short amount of time, and it convinces you to think that it's great or like greater than it is, which is ironic because that does make it great because it is able to fool so many people. But the whole movie basically comes down to this: there's this story being told, it's not really true, and that's the twist ending, that this guy is lying and he's evil. So the only lesson you can take out of it is that you were being lied to by people all the time. Possibly like the movie has more information than you about how your own brain works, so they can manipulate you. And there's other elements out there like governments, media, people who are trying to influence your mind, and they're able to run with narratives that, like Verbals, may be based in some truth, but they are then enhanced, or the true villains, the devil, the great quote, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. So perhaps people behind a lot of the evil in the world are able to slip away from the detection of, that it's them. Maybe that they are able to put it on, Keaton, for example, like someone else, a red herring, or like this film does, it's just able to sow enough confusion in your brain. And again, like governments, like media, they're able to trigger these cause and effect reactions in you because they know what they say, or how they present information. It's going to make people think a certain way, and also think that they kind of have all the information instead of being able to digest it, which is exactly what this film does, because it throws the twist ending on you right at the end, and it doesn't really give your brain enough time to comprehend it. And then even if you do go back and watch it again, you get so lost in the plot that they take you down this dark and winding path, that by the time you do get to the end, you do have some of those feelings of boredom and a little bit of confusion, but the ending is so satisfying to your brain that you're kind of convinced. Again, you're like, well, I didn't really get it, but yeah, like it makes sense, because your brain is not operating. You have to recognize the limitations of your own brain, that you can't see everything perfectly. And yeah, the true brilliance of this film is being able to show, or being able to trick people and reveal, like the whole point of this story is to tell people that you can be tricked, and like the devil, however you may interpret that in this world, like could be, some people I think might believe in the literal devil, or it could be people acting in evil ways, is able to do enough magic that they dodge accountability, and that's it. All the other stuff, like, oh, it's all a big lie, like just the way people talk about it, like the intricately woven plot, like you got to explain is what you mean when you say that. Otherwise, to me, it just makes you sound like an idiot. Like you don't know what you're talking about. Like you can't even justify your own position. You're like, yeah, as Wallace says, like one of these people who just watches something and then is like, oh, it was good, because the movie makers are able to convince you that it's good. And films these days are so awful that, you know, all these films from the 90s, like, they're great. Like, we know they're great. But you have to be able to dig a little deeper and see, why is it great? Like, is it intricately woven, or is it just a trick? Because none of this plot happened. It's the whole, Verbil's got his story, but the makers of The Usual Suspects have their story as well, and that's the story that they're selling to you to make a whole bunch of money. And you're tricked by it, so you think, oh, it was really great. But it's really a simple message. Even though the film's over 2 hours long, all it comes down to is you're being lied to, and the people who are lying to you know how to do it in such a way that you'll love it. Or even if you sort of catch on that it's a lie, you won't really get the real lie. So yeah, Usual Suspects. Don't go back and watch it again to kind of work out what's going on. Everything you need to know is there from the first time.